Hi guys, and welcome to today's tutorial. For this video I'm going to be showing you how to make my Snowflake wind spinner. I know a lot of you are probably wondering where I got the silver sparkly yarn from, but when I was shopping for this, all I did was search for metallic yarn. Okay, so that's all you need to do. I'm not going to say the specific brand because obviously there are several out there. I chose to use silver, but you can buy gold and various other colours. The spinner itself, as you can see, is also a little snowflake. It's slightly different to the decoration that I've made. So this one is also my own pattern. It's slightly different to the actual wind spinner because of the way that the wind spinner has to spiral and has to be worked in the flat before it'll actually spin. It can't be worked in the exact same way as this one. Okay, right, so as always with my wind spinners, you will need a 3mm crochet hook and a pair of scissors, the yarn of your choice. Now for this video I'm not going to be demonstrating in this metal yarn because it's not very video friendly. As you can see, looking at that, there's no way that you can decipher what stitches I've done there. So I am going to making them, both that's the spinner and the decoration, solely in white yarn, just so that you can clearly see these stitches on the outside, because obviously these are the ones that are really important for making them look like snowflakes rather than stars. Okay, so that's the intro done. I think that's everything we need. So let's get started. So just before we begin, I'm just going to come back to you with a couple of notes. So to begin, we're going to be creating a slip knot and then a chain of multiples of 10 plus one chain as your turning stitch. Okay, just to note that with this spinner in particular, approximately every 10 chains equates to one snowflake or one tier of the spinner. So this one here, if I show you, so this one here for the demo, for the prototype, I did a chain of 40. So you can see it's made 4 snowflakes, or 4 tiers to your spinner. So I would suggest that you do a minimum of 50 to 60 chains on that, and that will give you 5 or 6 snowflakes. Obviously you can do more, but that would probably be the minimum that I would suggest for that. Okay, so as I just mentioned, to begin, we're going to be making a slip knot and then chain your multiples of 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever you want to do, plus one chain for turning. I'm going to be explaining most of this pattern in US terms, with a quick sort of note every now and then to remind you of UK terms if required. So we're going to, for the purposes of the video, I've made a chain of 30 plus 1, and then I've come along and I've single crocheted into each stitch along. Remember, I'm using US terms, so this would be a double crochet for UK users. Okay, then we've come to the end, so we've got our 30 stitches. Then we are going to make a chain of 3, turn our work, so we're now working on round 2. Then into the same space as our chain 3, we're going to work 3 double crochets. Okay, so that would be 3 treble crochets in UK terms, all into that same stitch space. 1, 2, and 3, all into that one stitch. Okay, then what we're going to do is chain 1 and skip the next stitch. So chain 1, skip this stitch here. Okay, and we're going to work into this next one here. Then into this next one we're going to work 4 double crochets. Okay, so 4 double crochets in US terms, 4 treble crochets in UK terms, all into that same stitch. And 4. And then again we're going to chain 1 and skip the next stitch, and then into the following stitch we're going to work another 4 double crochets or 4 treble crochets. Okay, so we're going to repeat that all the way along until we get to the end of this round. So you should be looking a little bit like this. So you should have a nice big block of 4 stitches of your colour, and then a chain 1 and a gap without a stitch in, okay? And I'll meet you back at the end of round 2. Now we've reached the end of round 2. I've just completed my last 4 double crochets, and then I'm just going to simply insert 1 more double crochet into this last stitch here, okay, because it's at the end, it doesn't matter too much. And then what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1, turn our work, then we're going to chain another 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, so we've got 5 in total. Then we are going to single crochet into our chain 1 space, okay, so ignore your stitches there, we're going straight into this chain 1 space, so chain 5 in total, and then single crochet into the chain 1 space, or double crochet if you're using UK terms. Then we are simply going to repeat that all the way along, so it's going to be a chain of 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, skip over our 4 double crochets and work into our chain 1 space, a single crochet into there, so chain 5 and a single crochet into that chain 1 space, and finish that round off, and I'll meet you back at the end. Now we're at the end of round 3. I've got my final chain 5, and then what I'm going to do is just skip over the 4 stitches there and then just single crochet into that end piece there, okay? Then what we're going to do is make a chain of 1 and turn our work. Now what we're going to do is work 9 single crochets into each chain 5 space, okay, so that's 9 double crochets if you're using UK terms and 9 single crochets if you're using US terms, so all into the same chain 5 space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, move your stitches around if you need, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so we've got 9 single crochet into our chain 5 space. Then we are going to insert 1 single crochet into the top of the single crochet from the previous round. Okay, so we've got our 9 single crochets worked into a chain 5 space, then a single crochet into the top of the single crochet, and then 9 single crochet, 1 single crochet, 9 single crochet, 1 single crochet, all the way to the end. And as always, I'll meet you at the bottom. So by the end of round 4, your work should be looking like this, kind of like a little flower. To finish this round off, after the final 9 single crochets, I found a next chain space and then I inserted 1 more single crochet just to secure the round. We're now going to begin work on round 5. So to do this, we're going to make a chain of 3, then turn our work, and we're going to work several stitches into the 5th single crochet in our group of 9. Okay, so I wouldn't advise following the stitch posts because you can end up going into the wrong stitch. I always go by the V's when it comes to this, so ignore that first one because that's our chain of 1. Then we're going to skip 4 stitches, so 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then we're going to work into our 5th one here, okay? And into this 5th one we're going to work 1 half double crochet followed by a double crochet followed by a treble crochet, so yarn over twice, and then another double crochet and a half double crochet. Okay, so for UK terms that would be a half treble crochet followed by a treble crochet followed by a double treble, then another treble and another half treble crochet. Okay, and that's all into that same 5th stitch space. Now on the other side we're going to make a chain of 3, then we're going to skip another 4 stitches and then slip stitch into the 5th V. Okay, so skip 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches and slip stitch into the 5th V there. Okay, so this is what you should have. You should have a chain of 3 on this side, your little scallop here in the center, and then another chain of 3. Then we're going to chain another 3, skip another 4 stitches, and then work into the 5th. So go back to your V's, skip 1, 2, 3 and 4, and work into the 5th one here, the same as we did in the 5th one before. So a half double crochet followed by a double crochet followed by a treble, another double crochet, and finished with a half double crochet. Okay, now we're going to be repeating this sequence all the way along. So remember, when we get to the end of our scallop, we're going to chain 3, skip 4 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, slip stitch into the 5th, chain another 3, skip the next 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and work a scallop starting with your half double crochet into that 5th stitch. Okay, and you're going to repeat that all the way along until the end, and I will meet you at the final part of the round to finish off. By the end of round 5, your work should be looking a little bit like this, so a bit sort of like a pointed flower or a star. Okay, to finish this round off, I've completed the final shell and I've made a chain of 3. At this point now, this would be where I would be changing over to my silver, so for my outer trim colour. Okay, but as I said before, for the video I'm not going to be using this silver because you really would not be able to see what the stitches are that I'm doing, and it's really important that they go into the correct place, otherwise it'll throw your whole spinner off. Okay, so you'd finish your scallop, make a chain of 3 as normal, and then skip the next 4 stitches and into the next stitch after that, or stitch space, whatever you need to find, chain 1 space maybe. If you're changing colour, you'd start your normal single crochet with the 2 loops on your hook of the first colour, and then if you wanted to change the trim colour, for example, say I wanted red, you would insert that over your hook, pull that one up through both loops of your original colour, yarn over to make a chain of 1, and then you would add your chains for your next round. Okay, as I said, I'm just going to be doing the white, so I'm just going to set my hook back on there. And single crochet into that end, chain 1 space there. Okay, so for round 6, like I said, it's really important that you get these stitches in the right position, otherwise it just your snowflake just won't be right at all. But at the same time, it's very easy to see if you have gone wrong before you get to the end, and then realize you will see it as you are going, so that is a bonus. So to begin round 6, we're going to make a chain of 4. We're going to turn our work, then we're going to slip stitch into this chain space here. So slip stitch, chain of 4, and slip stitch into our chain space there. Then we're going to make another chain of 4, and then we're going to find the first stitch of our scallop and we're going to slip stitch into that one there, so in under the V. So we've done 1 chain of 4, slip stitched into the chain space, second chain of 4, and into the first of our scallops. Now we're going to make a chain of 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And again, we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch. Okay, so you should have something that looks a little bit like this. Now, this bit's very important, so you need to listen carefully. Okay, so this is all going to be worked in the same length of chains. Okay, so we're going to make a chain of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then we're going to slip stitch back into the 3rd chain. Okay, so you can either count from the top or the bottom, it doesn't matter. I'll go from the top. So 1, 2, into this 3rd chain here, we're going to slip stitch. Okay, so you should have something that looks like this. Then we're going to make 2 picots. So a picot is a chain of 3, so 1, 2 and 3, and then a slip stitch back into the 1st chain created. Okay, so it's the same as what we've just done, but without the 2 chains at the beginning. So that's 1, and then another one, so chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and slip stitch back into the 1st chain. And there we go, and that you should have something that looks like this at the moment. Okay, so 3 little triangles. Then what we need to do is slip stitch into the 2nd chain of the original 5 that we created. Okay, so just under this first bump, we need to slip stitch into this one here, into our 2nd chain. And then what that does is create a little peak, okay, a little triple picot. Then we need to make a chain of 2 and slip stitch into the next stitch. So not this stitch base here, the next one, okay? In under both these and slip stitch into there. And there you have the tip of your snowflake, okay? Now we're going to work as we did on the opposite side. So we need to make a chain of 6, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and slip stitch into the next stitch space. So find your next stitch space and slip stitch into there. Then we're going to make a chain of 4, 3, 4, and slip stitch into our chain space here. Another chain of 4, so now we are repeating what we've done already. So chain of 4, and then slip stitch into the next chain space. Okay, so we're skipping this V here and we're going to slip stitch into this next one. Do one more chain of 4, 2, 3 and 4, and then slip stitch into that first stitch space there of our scallop. Okay, so at the beginning we only did 2 sets, but from now on we're going to be doing 3. Okay, so you finish off your point of your snowflake with a chain of 4 into that chain space there, then another chain of 4 over to the 2nd chain space, and then a 3rd chain of 4 into your next scallop. Now we're going to work another chain of 6 and slip stitch into the following stitch space. There. Now we're going to be working the tip of our snowflake again, so we're going to be chaining 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and then we're going to slip stitch down into the 3rd chain to make our first picot, our first triangle. Now chain 3 and slip stitch back into the first of our 3 chains. To make our 2nd triangle, and chain 3 for the 2nd time and slip stitch back into that first stitch chain there. So we've got our 3 little triangles, and then we need to slip stitch down into the 2nd chain from the original that we created, slip stitch into there. So then we've got our little group of 3 picots. Make a chain of 2 and slip stitch into the next stitch. Don't forget, not the same one, the next stitch. And again, a chain of 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, slip stitch into the next stitch. And I'm just going to show you the 3 sets of 4 chains one last time, just so that you got a refresher, and then you can re-watch if you need. So 1, 2, 3 and 4, slip stitch into our first chain space here, chain another 4, slip stitch into the next chain space, chain 1 last lot of 4, and slip stitch into the beginning of our scallop. Okay, and then you repeat that sequence all the way around, all the way down to the end, and you will eventually see that you have your little snowflake. Okay, so if you need a quick revision of these stitches, then just pause the video, rewind it, and I suggest maybe getting a pen and paper and just jotting down the sequence of stitches just for these bits here, because it is rather complicated at the end. Okay, so then work all the way down to the end and finish off with your final peak here, and then a chain of 4 into this chain space here, and then I would do one more chain of 4 and slip stitch into the chain space just underneath this final chain here. Okay, so then that would be your wind spinner finished. If I'll just show you with the silver. Okay, so we've got the top here, so we've got our initial foundation chain and our single crochets, then we've got our groups of 4 double crochets, then our first set of chains, then the single crochets into those, then the scallops, and then the edging that we've just completed there. Okay, and then I've gone all the way down to the bottom, and I will show you how to make the snowflake, and then we will go to assembling after that. To make our snowflake, so this one here, our snowflake decoration, we're going to be using our 3mm hook still, and we're going to begin by making a magic ring. If you're not familiar with this, if you have a look on my YouTube channel, I've got a playlist there called Crochet Basics, and in there is a nice slow tutorial of how to make the magic ring. So our magic ring is created, and now we're going to work 12 single crochet into the ring. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 11 and 12. Okay, so that is correct, 12 into our magic ring. Now take your magic ring tail and pull that closed. Okay, so we've got like a little donut in the middle there. Now what we're going to do for round 2 is we're going to work a puff stitch into each of our single crochets. Okay, so to do this, find your first stitch. So I'm just going to count back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. Okay, so mine is tucked around there slightly. So to create a puff stitch, basically it's a group of unfinished half double crochets. So you yarn over your hook and insert it into your stitch once, pull up a loop. So you've yarned over, inserted your hook and pulled up a loop once. Now keep this on your hook, yarn it over a second time and go back into the stitch again, pull up a loop. So that's twice, and yarn over again, back into that stitch for a third time, pull up a loop for the third time, and then one last final time, so the fourth time, yarn over, insert your hook into your stitch, pull up a loop. So that's 4 times. Okay, yarn over your hook one last time and pull through all of the loops on your hook. Okay, you might need to give it a bit of a wiggle, and that is your first puff stitch created. Now normally you would then create a chain and then a half double crochet into the next stitch, but with this pattern I actually found it is better to just do continuous puff stitches. Okay, so I'm not going to chain one after completing this. I'm going to go straight into the next stitch space, so the next single crochet, and work another puff stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop once, yarn over, insert your hook twice, yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop 3 times, and one more time, yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop 4 times. yarn over one last time and pull through all loops on your hook. Okay, now you're going to continue doing that for all 12 single crochets, so you'll have 12 puff stitches at the end of round 2, and I'll meet you back here when you've completed those. So at the end of round 2 we should have 12 puff stitches, and then to finish this round we're going to slip stitch into that very first stitch there. Okay, so that's our round 2 finished. Then for round 3 what we're going to do is make a chain of 4. So 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then we are going to slip stitch into the next stitch. Okay, so a chain of 4 and a slip stitch. Again, another chain of 4 and a slip stitch into the following stitch, and we're going to repeat that all the way around for round 3, and I'll pause the video here and come back to you at the end of that one. So by the end of round 3 you should have what looks like a little sort of puffy flower, and you should have 12 of these chain 4 spaces going all the way around. Okay, I've done my final chain 4 and then slip stitched into my last stitch there, so we don't need to join with a further slip stitch. What we need to do now is we do need to slip stitch for for round 4, sorry, we need to slip stitch into our chain space here. Okay, and then what we're going to do is make a chain of 5 this time. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and then slip stitch into the next chain 4 space. Again, chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and slip stitch into the following chain 4 space, and we're going to repeat that all the way around, and I will meet you back at the end. We've now reached the end of round 4, and I'm just going to finish off this final chain 5, and I'm going to slip stitch back down into this space here. Okay, so try and sort of jimmy into a stitch there and pull your yarn up through, and you slip stitched into there just to make that more even. So that's what you should have now at the end of round 4. So for round 5 what we're going to do is we're going to start by slip stitching into this first chain space here. Okay, so we need to get our yarn into that first chain space. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to start work on our scallops like we did with our main spinner. We're going to be working on this one here. So into this chain space we're going to work 1 half double crochet, followed by 1 double crochet, followed by a treble, one more double, and a half double crochet. Okay, so that's our scallop into our first lot of chain 5 spaces. Now what we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch into this next chain space like so, and then work our scallop into the next chain space. So just yarn over and start your half double crochet as normal, then a double, a treble, another double, and the final half double, and then again slip stitch into the next chain, and we're going to repeat that sequence all the way around until we get to the end here. Okay, so now we're at the end of round 5, and you should have something that looks like this with 6 points to your snowflake. And after our 6th scallop we've slip stitched into the chain space as normal, and to begin round 6 what we're going to do is we're going to, so not into the chain space, into the next stitch, this one here, we're going to work 1 single crochet into that stitch space there, and then into the next stitch here we're going to slip stitch. Okay, now we're on the edging. Obviously if you did want to change colour do so on the first single crochet or from the slip stitch of the last round. As I said earlier, I'm not going to show you with the silver because you won't see the stitches, and the one on the snowflake decoration, the edging is slightly different to the one on the main spinner body because the main spinner is working in a spiral, whereas this is a perfect round. So just pay a little bit of attention because there are some slight differences. Okay, so we've single crocheted into the first stitch and then stitched into the second. Now we need to make a chain of 4 and slip stitch into the next stitch. Now we're going to make our chain of 6, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and slip stitch into the same stitch space. Okay, so we're going back into this same space on this one. Then we're going to slip stitch up to the next stitch. Okay, then we're going to make a chain of 5, 3, 4, 5, slip stitch back down into the third stitch and chain 3, slip stitch down into the first. So this is all the same as the spiral, and another chain of 3, slip stitch into the first stitch to make our third triangle, our third picot. Then again slip stitch down into that second chain from the original chain of 5, chain another 2, okay, and then slip stitch into the next stitch on this one. Okay, so we're still slip stitching into the next one on this. Then make our chain of 6, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and slip stitch back into that same space. Okay, so chain of 6 and back into the same space, chain of 4 and slip stitch into the next stitch there. Okay, so that's our first snowflake point made. And we're now going to single crochet into the next 2 stitches. So 1 there and 1 there. So now we're back over to the next scallop. Then we're going to make our chain of 4, slip stitch into the next stitch, then chain our 6 and slip stitch back into that same space there, then slip stitch into the next stitch and continue with our sequence all the way around. So our chain of 5, slip stitch into the third, chain of 3, slip stitch into the first, another chain of 3, slip stitch into the first, and then slip stitch back down into that second chain from the original 5, chain 2 and slip stitch into the next stitch, and one more row of chain of 6, slip stitch back into that same stitch space, chain of 4 and into the next space, and then we're going to work 1 single crochet into the next 2 stitches. So 1 single crochet and 2. Okay, and then you're going to repeat that sequence all the way around until you've done all 6 of your snowflake points. So now we have completed our snowflake. What I've done is in the final peak here, I've done my chain of 4 and then worked the first double crochet. But what I might do to finish off, rather than doing a second double crochet into that stitch there, is just perform a slip stitch instead, just to help disguise that as you're starting round. And I'm probably actually going to slip stitch into that second one also. Okay, so there we go. So I mean, it's up to you. If you are happy to hang your snowflake from the center there rather than from one of the tips, then you could just pull up your yarn here to make a long loop and then thread that through the base of your spinner and double over. If not, obviously just trim off your ends, fasten off and weave in as normal. Your snowflake tips will need a little bit of working on depending on what yarn you've used. So just go along and tweak out the picots and the chain 6s in particular, just to give it that nice triangular shape. You might want to stiffen them or block them as well, that may help with the shaping. So that's pretty much that there. Okay, so that's actually how the snowflake looks in the white. I actually think that's really pretty as well. So yeah, it's entirely up to you which way around that you do it. So that's our snowflake, and as I said, you can either pull up a loop and double it over and then attach it to the bottom of your spinner. I'm just going to show you a few pointers about attaching this spinner in particular, because of the shaping of the spirals, because they're not circular, because they've got this extra weight at the edges here. When it comes to attaching your hanging loop and attaching your snowflake to the bottom, I would say go in a few stitches. So don't attach right at the end of your single crochets, your starting chain. Go in a couple of stitches first so that you've got a nice big overhang here. So you've got about 1 inch from your hanging loop to the bottom of your first snowflake tip there, because I found that if you do hang it that little bit too far out, it tends to make the edges tilt like this, as opposed to hanging it from there where then they'll sit quite nice and flat and horizontal. Okay, so for the hanging loop, I've done what I always do with the spinners, is just attached a single strand of yarn to our preferred position. I would test it as well just before you do fully permanently attach. And then I've just looped over the top and created a slip knot at the top there. So then it is adjustable to whatever area I want to hang it from. And then for the bottom, I've basically done the same. I've attached it to the back of my work there. And then just double knotted it at the base of this spinner. And like I said, remember to make sure that you go in several stitches to avoid this being pulled down at the bottom. It just helps it stay more horizontal. Okay, so that is your little snowflake spinner. Thank you so much for watching my tutorial, guys. If you did enjoy it, please pop a like on the video below. This helps other people see this tutorial too. And also, if you're not already a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. We've got lots more festive thing makes coming up very shortly, as well as and maybe another couple of spinners or two. Okay, until next time, I'll see you again, and thank you. Happy crocheting.